Hello and welcome to the Korean Beauty Show podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Lee, the founder of Style Story, where you can shop, learn and explore the world of Korean skincare, and the founder of K-beauty brand Jellyco. So for today's episode, I had this idea a couple of weeks ago and I'm just going to run with it and see if you are interested in this. You'll have to let me know. But the idea that came to me was, how about if we start answering some of the most Googled questions about Korean beauty? And the reason for that is obvious, is that if they're the most Googled questions, they're probably the things that people are actually the most curious about. So I thought, why don't I attempt to answer some of those? And the thing is, I've run through, there's like a whole list of them, and a lot of them are very generic and very broad topics, but there's some meat and bones in there that I think a lot of our listeners will find useful, because I'm not sure that we've necessarily directly answered some of these. So I'm going to start doing some of these for our deep dive episodes. If you hate them, if you don't want to hear about it, if this is boring, please just let me know and we can do something else. But I just thought for something a little bit different, I've never actually done this before, so I'm going to answer some of the most Googled questions about Korean beauty. And one of the first ones that popped up when I typed this into my Google search bar was, is Korean beauty natural? And this is obviously an impossible question to answer in a single sentence or a yes and no. So I thought what might actually be helpful is to take a look at how the process and the system and the framework actually works in Korea. So the starting point of any discussion about cosmetics in Korea is, of course, the Cosmetics Act, which is the main piece of legislation that regulates cosmetics. And then there's the body that oversees all of that, which is the MFDS, the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety. Now, the interesting thing when it comes to any discussion about natural beauty is that in a lot of places, a lot of different countries, the term natural skincare, natural cosmetics, natural beauty products is not actually regulated. So it's often left up to brands, individual companies to kind of decide what that means. And that surprises a lot of people. So Australia is one of those countries that leaves it up to brands to determine the meaning of natural. And the US is actually the same. So the FDA has confirmed that they, and this is a quote from them, do not define the term natural, and they have not established a regulatory definition for this term in cosmetic labeling. So they also don't have regulations for the term organic for cosmetics. Instead, the US Department of Agriculture, so the USDA, regulates the use of the term organic for agricultural products. So that's kind of different. Korea is a little bit of an exception to the rule, and that is that at the moment they do actually have legislation regulating the term natural skincare, and there are also supporting regulations and standards as well. So let's take a look at how all of this works, but then keep listening because there's a little bit of an update to this as well that is going to impact on all of this. But basically what happened was, back in 2019, the MFDS implemented regulations on the standards of natural and organic cosmetic products. And this was actually set out. So there's various regulations. Article 14-2 of the Cosmetics Act sort of sets out a framework as well. So the regulation actually defines both organic and natural skincare. It sets out the permitted ingredients, the manufacturing processes, and the requirements for businesses as well. So the designation in Korea is 천연 화장품, and that literally means natural cosmetic. So there is a label or like a sticker, a little thing that natural cosmetics in Korea have been using since 2019. And in order to get that little sticker or label that you can use, the product actually has to go through a pretty stringent process. And that involves quite a few different things. One is certifying the ingredients in the product. Obviously, if we're talking about natural skincare, people that use natural skincare products are particularly worried about what goes into the cosmetics. So in the case of 천연 화장품, natural cosmetics, the ingredients must be 95% or more naturally derived. But they don't kind of stop there. They also look into the manufacturing process of the product as well. So if we're talking about organic Korean cosmetics, that is slightly different. So you've got the certification for natural, but then in order to have the certification for organic, besides the 95% concentration of natural raw materials, you also need to have over 10% organic ingredients. So there's then this whole set of standards that are basically set out, and they are very prescriptive in terms of what the brand can and can't do in order to get their products certified as a natural or organic product. For example, the regulations set out everything from the types of materials that can be used, for example, natural ingredients, natural raw materials, water, those kind of things. They also set out what can't be used. So, for example, synthetic raw materials that don't occur in nature. So there's an exception for synthetic raw materials that are necessary for the quality or safety of natural or organic cosmetics, but that are difficult to replicate in nature. But again, those kind of ingredients can only be used within the 5%. So 95% of whatever they're putting into the product has to be natural. And then within that 5%, they make this exception for the synthetic raw materials that are necessary for quality or safety. Then the manufacturing process also, they set out requirements for that. It has to maintain the inherent quality of the raw materials and not cause contamination. So there's even like a list of cleaning agents that need to be used, and like there's a restriction around the kind of containers and things like that that you can store them in. For example, PVC or polystyrene, they are out. So you can see that it's quite a stringent process for actually falling within this regime if you want to get your products certified as natural. So lots of different steps that you have to go through. But if you go through all of them and your manufacturer goes through all of them and you tick all the boxes, the product then is issued with a certification and this mark that designates it as a natural cosmetic. However, because you might have listened to all that and gone, geez, that sounds like a lot of effort and a lot of work, and it is. So I had a look, and between 2019 and 2021, there were only 34 products that were registered as natural and organic cosmetics. So that doesn't mean that only 34 products in Korea, in the Korean beauty sphere, met the legal definition of natural or organic. It just means that only 34 managed or bothered to go through that process of actually getting their products tested and doing all of that. Now, there are a lot of reasons, obviously, why a brand might decide against doing that. And one of the big ones that I can think of is actually just that Korean consumers have this real preference for, and they care a lot about the EWG rating system. Now, I've talked about this on the show many times. It like basically uses a red light, amber light, and green light approach to skincare that is super problematic and has been widely discredited by a lot of people in the scientific community just because of how they rank the harm of certain ingredients, and then that then goes into, the product when, these apps that everyone's using these days, and it's like, is my product safe or harmful? And if you run them through these apps, they come up with like, oh, alert, alert. This is the kind of thing that is really, really popular in Korea as well. So, Korean consumers really care about that. But the thing about the EWG rating system is because it is so enmeshed and inbuilt into K-beauty, particularly in Korea, a lot of the like Hwahae and, things like that, where people go to actually rate and rank cosmetics and leave reviews and things like that, that whole system is like already built into the app. So you don't need to go away and have your product certified by a third party or, your ingredients and materials and all these things checked. You basically just formulate to those standards. So when you're working with your formulators, your team of cosmetic chemists, you obviously give them a brief of exactly the kind of product that you are hoping to create. And a lot of the time in Korea, it is a given, or a lot of formulators assume it's a given that you want to manufacture to the EWG rating standard. So you kind of need to specify if you don't want to do that, because that's how ingrained it is. So then you just come up with a formula list and that doesn't contain any of the red or amber ingredients and make that product. Like, you don't sort of need to then go away and have this extra like complicating factor of getting a certification. So that's, I think, one of the reasons why this system didn't really take off in Korea, is because there's an easier way to do it, right? The other big thing is, of course, this system is only operational domestically within Korea. So like outside of Korea, how many people are going to necessarily care about this mark, this local domestic Korean mark, to certify that a product is a 천연 화장품? Like, I guess that depends, right? However, I wasn't the only one that obviously thought that this was, not a great system. And, the brands obviously didn't think it was a great system either, because you can see that not very many brands bothered to put products through the system. So the MFDS actually did identify that the low number of products being registered was an issue. So they've tried various things to kind of simplify the process and make it easier for brands to comply with. They tinkered around with a little bit in 2021, but essentially what they have come out and decided to do is actually scrap the whole system. So that whole process that I just went through and explained to you how it all works and what you need to do and the chemicals and the containers and all of that, basically that's going to be being done away with. So the Prime Minister Han Duck-soo actually announced plans to scrap this system along with like 256 other certification systems in Korea. So this is not the only one being overhauled. It is one of hundreds. But in February 2024, basically came out and said, like, we're getting rid of this. We are going to just let brands use the Cosmos certification system. And this is the other big one that exists, I guess, in the world of natural beauty products. So it's a private certification. It is issued by an international non-for-profit. And basically, the system for being certified or registered under Cosmos is actually quite similar to the system that I just went through, the domestic Korean system. Basically, more than 95% of the total ingredients of the products need to be derived from nature. Then the product itself can be classified as natural. In the case of organic cosmetics, it's a little bit more stringent. So it needs to be composed of more than 20% of organic ingredients. So that's just that little bit of a higher bar than the domestic Korean system. And essentially the reason why Korea has decided now to just leave it up to industry and individual brands to get certified through Cosmos is because people were saying it's basically a double certification system. It was too burdensome. It was too hard. So the industry was actually demanding that the certification system be done away with. And then the Korea Cosmetics Association basically went to the government and asked them to abolish the certification system so that it could be privatized through Cosmos. Basically just saying, it was hindering product development. Now, whether that's true or not, I just feel like it's not very efficient or effective to have two different systems that you want to go, that you need to go through. In terms of whether it hindered product development, I don't know, maybe. I feel like if brands want to go through the Cosmos system anyway, it's not dissimilar, at least, to the Korean system. But having those dual, competing systems that you need to comply with for when you're exporting a product out of Korea and for when you're distributing a product within Korea, I guess if you are a brand that your natural beauty is your core philosophy and the core marketing principle of your brand, like maybe that would be, quite a daunting task, I guess, to go through that system twice. So that is what is happening. The revision of the Cosmetics Act is apparently underway. I haven't been able to find anything to say that it's actually done and that the system is officially dead, but that is pretty much what's happening. So they have decided to abolish that entire domestic Korean certification system. But none of this goes, I guess, to the more broad question, which is, so obviously the Googled term that we were trying to answer is Korean beauty natural? And I guess it then really depends on what your definition of natural is. Is it the same as the definition was under the Korean legislative system that they're going to get rid of? Is it the same as, the Cosmos system? And I think the more broad question, if you are wondering about natural Korean beauty products and what that all means, is is natural necessarily better? I think there is something that is called the natural fallacy, and that's basically the belief that things that are natural or that come from nature are inherently better or superior. But there are a lot of reasons why that's not necessarily the case, and that is even more so, I think, when it comes to our skincare. And I think the thing is, the bottom line is that the safety of an ingredient or a particular product often has nothing to do with whether that product is natural or not. For example, some synthetic ingredients can be safer than some natural ingredients. Like, if you want to take a really extreme example, think about poison. Like, poison, you can have natural poisons that are obviously very unsafe. You know, it would depend on the dose that you're taking. But I think that there is also a tendency that I hear a lot of the time when people are talking about ingredients and products and things like that, and that is a tendency to conflate synthetic chemicals with harsh chemicals. So people will often say, oh, look, I want a product that is free from harsh chemicals. But synthetic and lab-grown chemicals are not necessarily harsh. Like, that just isn't, like, they aren't the same thing. So I'm not a cosmetic chemist. I don't pretend to be one, but I have had a lot to do with chemicals, particularly as an importer of products. So when you import beauty products to Australia, there is an entire regime that you have to comply with, the AICIS regime, and it is really, really complicated. It's a complicated system that importers need to comply with, and it basically meant that I needed to get my head around tens of thousands of different chemicals in order to be able to categorize everything and work out what our reporting obligations were. You know, did we need any additional documentation and all of those kind of things for the products that we were importing to Australia. So that was kind of a crash course in a lot of ingredients, and that is why I understand an INCI list, a formula list, probably better than a lay person. The other thing is that now at this point, I've overseen the product development of lots of different personal care products for our brands, for other brands that we've worked with. So I kind of have a working understanding of how this all works, even though I myself am not a chemist. So I think a couple of things I have found to be true in my time sort of doing this, and that is that you are not always going to be working with the best ingredients when you are restricted to natural ingredients. And that is because many natural ingredients are not necessarily as effective as the synthetic ones. You are also going to have fewer options if you are formulating solely with natural ingredients. So basically, two issues there. There are less options and they don't always work as well. So, you know, the INCI dictionary lists about 22,000 roughly different chemicals that can be used in cosmetics, but only a fraction of those are actually considered natural. So that is an issue in general, is having a lot less options, a lot less products that you can actually work with. The other big one that you will see played out from time to time, you know, with specific brands, natural brands, clean beauty brands that, you know, will get scandals and things like that from time to time, is usually to do with issues with preservation. So natural ingredients are more prone to contamination than synthetic ingredients, and that is because at their base level, preservatives are designed to prevent microbial growth in products. So, you know, issues with mold and things like that you will see crop up from time to time with certain clean beauty brands, natural beauty brands. A lot of the time that is because they had a preservation system that was lacking, that was not quite up to scratch. So that can be a problem with natural formulation and natural ingredients. The other big one that I myself have quite a big problem with, because of my history as a distributor and now as a brand owner, is short shelf life. So because of the aforementioned problems with preservatives, a lot of natural beauty products actually have very short shelf lives, and that can cause a whole range of different problems. For one, you know, when you're distributing products that have a really short shelf life, it just doesn't give you a whole lot of time to manufacture the product, get it on a boat, send it to where it's going to be sent, get it on shelves, and then sell it before the time runs out on the product. So that's not great. The other thing is, because they have a shorter shelf life, it can actually end up that you are creating products that are in the long term worse for the environment, because it leads to more waste. If products are expiring and going off on the shelf, or or they are, filled with mold because they're not properly preserved, then that then just leads to a whole lot of products going in the bin, going into landfill and causing more waste. And I think a lot of people, when they think of natural beauty, and one of the reasons that they are attracted to it is because they also want to, at some base level, do the right thing by the environment. So that can kind of be a double-edged sword. If you are formulating with all of these, natural ingredients that are going to go off quicker, it can actually lead itself to being worse for the environment in the long term when you look at the whole life cycle of the product. So that's something that not a lot of natural beauty brands necessarily want to have a conversation around, but I have run into that issue many times with certain Korean beauty brands that, were using, for example, this is one product I can happily talk about because it no longer it now contains a proper preservation system. But I remember once upon a time, the Innisfree Pore Clay Mask, that product had a really, really short period after opening that you could use it. I'm going to say off the top of my head, it was maybe 3 months. And, we used to get a lot of complaints from people saying that they had to throw out, in inverted commas, a perfectly good product because it had gone off before they could use it all up. Like, that's not ideal either. So I know, Innisfree, that used to be one of the linchpins of their whole marketing, for their brand, was natural beauty from Jeju Island. And as they grew and expanded, particularly overseas, it's not that they've moved away from that, but I have noticed that their formulation principles and standards have evolved and changed so that it is a lot easier for them to distribute their products internationally and have longer shelf lives and longer periods after opening. Because when you are exporting products, you need time to do all of those kind of things. By the time you get the products on a ship and then ship it to where it's going to be, you've already lost sometimes months from the product, being finalized at the cosmetic manufacturers, and then the period where it actually gets onto a shelf. So if you've already lost months and the product only had, a year or 2 years to run, that's also not ideal. So that is another issue with natural beauty products that I myself have experienced just in my time distributing products. The other thing is that a lot of the time, if you have this one natural ingredient that is the key ingredient in your product, the supply will often be inconsistent. And that's for obvious reasons. You need to rely on crops. Just like in farming, if a particular crop has a bad year, you're kind of out of luck. And there's a product that I can remember off the top of my head that ran into this exact problem. And this was the rose cleansing stick that was all the rage back in the day. And it was relying on natural rose petals in the formula. And I think what ended up happening, and one of the key reasons that the brand discontinued this viral product, they could not keep it on the shelves. It was sold out all the time. Everyone wanted to get their hands on it. It was the product of the mid-2010s. People were obsessed with it, and they ended up discontinuing it. And a big part of the reason, or so I heard, was that they could not get a consistent supply of rose petals to put in this cleansing stick that was all about the rose petals in the cleansing stick. So the supply of natural ingredients is going to be inconsistent. There are going to be differences, variations in the quality of a particular, crop and things like that. So that can be another issue, and why some brands, don't necessarily want to overly rely on natural ingredients in their products as well. The other big thing that I think is really important to take into account, a lot of the times people will be saying, I want to use natural products because they are better for your skin, right? But one study actually found that most all natural products contain ingredients that can trigger contact dermatitis. So in this particular study, the researchers found that 94.2% of all natural products contained at least one contact allergen, and 89.5% of them contained one or more contact allergens. So what that means is that just because an ingredient is natural, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is going to be compatible with your skin. So essential oils are a big one that I can think of. Herbal extracts, they're not always necessarily the most skin friendly. Yes, they're natural. They're not synthetic. So you can write on your product that it doesn't contain synthetic fragrances or artificial fragrances. But for a lot of people, essential oils are a big trigger. They can cause irritation, discomfort, redness, all of those kind of things. So I think that just goes to show that if you were looking for natural products or going natural in order to do the right thing by your skin, it's not necessarily the case that you can avoid issues like dermatitis just because you're using all natural products. And I think at the end of the day, consumers want products that work. So if a product is natural or all natural or free from synthetics, but it doesn't actually work, or it has a really short shelf life, or it's going to grow mold, or, all of these kind of different things, is that necessarily better than using products that have synthetic ingredients in them as well? Now, that's a very personal choice. And I'm not trying to necessarily dissuade anyone one way or the other, more just to present, a more nuanced discussion about some of the reasons why it's not as simple as all natural. And it's certainly not an easy question to answer, particularly when it comes to Korean beauty or any beauty products, whether, you just cannot answer the question, is Korean beauty natural, in any kind of a simplistic way, particularly because now that they are doing away with the regime, there is not going to be this certification standard that all brands need to manufacture to in order to claim natural certification. So look, I just thought that was an interesting question because there are so many different parts that go into that. Like, it's really, look, we've been talking about it for nearly half an hour. I don't think it's necessarily the easiest question to answer. Are there beauty brands in Korea that is their core philosophy, that they want to create natural cosmetics? Yes, there are. And there were, as we discussed, 34 or so products from between 2019 to 2021 that actually did carry this mark of natural Korean beauty products. Now, I had a look at what some of them were. And some of them were, these are not exactly viral products. One of them was called the Hwangjinmo Coconut Hair Loss Soap. And that was a very natural looking soap that was supposed to prevent hair loss. There was another one from a line actually from a brand called Swanee Cocoa that was black barley cream and toner. And from what I could see, it looks like they've been discontinued altogether. So I don't think a lot of these products are the kind of products that you are seeing doing the rounds on social media necessarily. They're not necessarily the kind of products that are going to have millions of sales. In fact, they're probably not even the kind of products that you would necessarily recognize, but there are some brands out there that is really important to them. And I have no doubt that there will be some Korean beauty brands that will go through this Cosmos certification process once the domestic Korean regime is done away with. But, it's an interesting topic to have a little bit of a chat about. And I do see it come up a lot. Particularly around, bad ingredients, or what ingredients are good and bad, and all of these ranking apps and things like that. And I think that, people want simple answers to a question that is just not actually that simple to answer. And I think a lot of the apps that are doing the rounds that rank ingredients and rate them and all of those things, they're trying to just simplify something that is just not that easy. And that's why a lot of people in the scientific community have an issue with them, because they're like, yeah, but you can't just, answer it that bluntly, because so many other things go into determining whether something is safe. And, but it's a far more nuanced discussion than that. So look, just a couple of things to have a think about if you were one of the people that was Googling this question. It's a whole to-do. So let me know if you have enjoyed this episode, if you enjoy this kind of format. We can answer. There are plenty more of the most Googled questions out there in Korean beauty that we can answer, and I'm happy to do that with you. Come and find me and let me know what you want to hear. Until next time, I will see you on Style Story and Jellicoe.